Okay, we're gonna start here. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first pavilion. My name is Felipe Guntin. I am a forest and climate advisor at the United Nations Environment Program, where I also work within the UN RED program. As many of you may know, the UN RED program is the flagship partnership of the UN between FAO, UNDP, and UNEP, supporting countries on forests. And for today's session, we're going to be touching two specific topics that we've been hearing a lot in all the corners in the COP: forest and finance. And although we are talking a lot about this, we still need to be connecting these things, and further reflection perhaps may be needed. We structured the morning around three different sessions. The first one, we're going to be looking at the status and paths for forest finance. And for this, we're going to be presenting two recently launched reports. The first one is the State of Finance for Forests from UNEP, and the second one is the Forest Declaration Assessment. And this is just terrible, sorry. The second session is going to be on the lessons learned from results-based RED Plus results-based payment. And my colleague Dirk from UNFCCC is going to be moderating this one. And the third one is on linking the private sector to indigenous-led forest and bioeconomy solutions. Okay, so let me just get into it, and now we'll start with a quick snapshot of what is the sorry, my meetings are starting to pop up. The State of Finance report. Good to see you, Leticia. So the State of Finance report basically tries to answer two questions. The first one is how much financing is reaching forests globally, and the second one is what level of investment is needed in order to achieve both the climate, biodiversity, and land degradation goals by 2030. So the first answer, or the first address of this report, it basically tracks all financial flows that contribute positively to the forest in alignment with these three Rio Conventions, both public and private finance. In the public side, this includes domestic flows and also international flows. And on the private financial resources, we have seen different public data sets in use in total six categories channels. These include impact investment, commodity chains, carbon markets, biodiversity offsets, and the third one, philanthropy. Okay. The second section of the report projects investment needs and opportunities in forests to meet global forest and environmental goals by 2030, and it's based on a model of agricultural production and its impact on environment. So here we go, and here we have the main figure and the main outcome of this report, which basically shows us that the total annual finance flows to forests were roughly 84 billion in 2023. Within this 84 billion, 77 billion, which represents around 91% of the forest finance, comes from public sources. Okay, so again, within this 77 billion, 96% of it, it's spent domestically, and we see this happening mostly in advanced economies, mainly in the US and in China, and on sustainable and agriculture and forestry. Only 4% of this finance is international public finance. And on the other 9% finance that comes from private sector, as I said, most of it is channeled through certified commodity supply chains, impact investment, and carbon markets. Okay, so moving on to the investment needs, the report quantifies how much global investment is needed in forests to meet the goals of the Rio Conventions, also aligning with the Glasgow Leaders Declaration on Forests and Land Use. And to estimate the investment needs, 6 key forest nature-based solutions were assessed. The first one, avoided deforestation, then reforestation, silvorable and silvopastoral systems, protected forest areas, and avoided peatland conversion. So the report, let me just be clear on some methodology aspects. The report only includes direct investment required for these interventions. It does not include enabling conditions such as governance, law enforcement, so I mean, this likely means that these numbers could be underestimated. They might be bigger if we consider these things. So, in a nutshell, by 2030, to make this possible, annual investment in forests must reach 300 billion by 2030 and 498 by 2050. Today, however, we know, as I said, global forest finance stands only at 84 billion a year, leaving us with a forest finance gap of 216 billions. So this report also, I mean, as I said, the report covers forests globally, but we also try to do a specific session on what tropical forest countries need within this whole piece. And we have found out that within tropical forest countries, the gap is of 67 billions per year, that within these 67 billions, 16 are the ones needed to protect standing tropical forests. And I don't want to do any type of spoiler here, but we have been recently listening from the government of Brazil on the potential of the TFFF that they have recently launched, which in full operation mode could cover, together with the potential of carbon market, could cover quite a good piece of this amount. And then 33 billions for restoration. I mean, this is obvious. We know that restoration costs a lot. And finally, 18 billion for agroforestry. And just to close, some reflections that are quite straightforward. We know that the forest finance must increase, must align, that there is a role from governments to create the regulations and advance on incentives to de-risk private investments in forests. And also, we need to combine all these different instruments that I've been mentioning, carbon markets, TFFF, blended finance, in a whole complementary financial system. And again, we've been hearing this a lot in many conversations and speeches from the Brazilian government, and this is something that is coming together. Lastly, but not less important, of course, that this finance must be delivered with transparency, fairness, equity, but also, when I talk about integrity, it must be delivered with urgency as well. So let's not make one thing block the other. So this is a quick snapshot of the report. If you want to see the whole thing, of course, you can scan the QR code, and we can talk later on the corridors if you have any doubt. So moving forward, I now invite here my colleague Gillian to walk us through the Forest Declaration Assessment Report.
Thank you, Felipe. Yeah. Thank Thank you so much, Felipe. So I'm really happy to be here. Thank you. Really happy to be here sharing with you all the findings from a very complementary report to the State of Forest Finance, which Felipe talked us through. I'll be sharing the findings on forest finance from the most recent Forest Declaration Assessment Report. And just quickly, the Forest Declaration Assessment is an annual independent assessment of progress against global forest goals. This is compiled by a civil society network of more than 30 organizations called the Forest Declaration Assessment Partners. My organization, Climate Focus, facilitates and coordinates that group. So I'll be sharing our findings on behalf of the partners. And we cover 4 thematic areas: overarching forest goals, sustainable production and trade, forest governance, and then finally forest finance, which is what I'll share today. And because Felipe has already talked us through the forest finance gap, I won't elaborate on that, but I'm going to actually talk about negative financial flows. And great, so one of the things that we look at are incentives governments provide, and private sector. We'll come to private finance as well, but incentives provided with the potential to impact forests. The overall finding is that incentives that are potentially harmful to forests dwarf those incentives that are meant to drive environmental benefits or benefits to forests and ecosystems. This is particularly stark in the example of subsidies to agricultural producers, which is seen here. So what we see is that governments spent $629 billion on average between 2021 and 2023 on direct support to agricultural producers. 65% of those take the form of subsidies for the use of inputs like fuel and fertilizer, which have been directly linked to negative impacts, particularly on biodiversity and ecosystems. Meanwhile, 0.3%, so that little line that you see in the middle, that almost looks like it's not there, this is the level of payments to support environmental outcomes. So what we see are that harmful subsidies, particularly in this example, outnumber green ones by 200 to 1. For scale, so, and also to connect back to that chart that Felipe showed with different sort of bars or different contributions of finance, we see so that 409 billion figure, which is what I showed on the previous slide, those support for agricultural inputs, again, dwarf the public finance for forests. So 5.9 billion includes all international funding sources, so that's ODA, REDD+, and funding under pledges, including, the Tenure Pledge, Congo Basin Pledge, and the whole suite of pledges that, particularly after COP26, we were very excited, right, to see this huge commitment of pledges. In fact, a lot of those pledges, those funds still haven't been dispersed. Something like 50% have been dispersed in the period since COP26. So that's something we'll continue to watch, especially now. Again, a lot of excitement around pledges, but we do need to watch, of course, the disbursement of those. So anyway, this is just agricultural subsidies that we see captured here in the 409 billion. This doesn't include, for example, fossil fuel subsidies and other kinds of incentives, but gives you a picture of the scale. And while many governments have acknowledged the need for subsidy reform, there aren't many examples of those actually being implemented. There are some nice examples I have to call out from Gabon, Cameroon, South Korea, Japan, and the UK, but not as many as we'd like to see. So, in the spirit of looking at implementation, we'll be keen to see if we have an uptick in investment in those kinds of subsidy reforms in the coming months. And finally, as I said, I will cover private finance briefly. So we see that private finance continues to heavily invest in forest risk commodity supply chains. Global Canopy reported in their most recent Forest 500 report that the 150 financial institutions that they assessed had a combined $8.9 trillion invested in deforestation-linked supply chains. And only 40% of the financial institutions most exposed even had a policy to address that kind of risk. So a big oversight in terms of the accountability and the governance over those investments. So finally, to address both the finance gap that Felipe talked about and these negative financial incentives that I've been sharing, we, Climate Focus and the Forest Declaration Assessment Partners, along with partners TNC, Conversion-Free Finance, over the last few months, we launched this in September of this year, and what we're doing is identifying high priority urgent actions that regulators, policymakers, and financial institutions can take to align financial flows with forest goals at scale. And I see some photos. I'll actually go ahead and share the QR codes for both the Forest Declaration Assessment, which is the progress tracking against all of those global forest goals, and then on the right is the priority actions for finance. Just quickly, some examples of the kinds of actions that have been identified are for governments aligning fiscal policy and economic planning, including subsidy reform, for central banks issuing supervisory expectations and risk management guidance, and for financial institutions allocating capital to sustainable ag and supporting corporate transitions. And I will note this is super aligned with the FCLP Forest Finance Roadmap, which was also launched in September. So we have really nice consensus and alignment between civil society and governments on what needs to happen. So again, now we look forward to seeing some of that move forward. Thank you so much, and I'm happy to talk more with those of you after the panel. Now I'll hand over to the panel to Felipe.
Thank you very much, Gillian. Okay, so we heard about where the money is, but mostly where it is not. So now it's time to shift gears and talk a little bit about the how. So for this, I'm going to invite two panelists here to join me, Mr. Bob Kasunga, my friend from Uganda, Red Plus Focal Point, and also Mr. Daniel Brandão, Nature-Based Solution Lead in Vox Capital. A warm welcome, colleagues, and thank you for being here with us. Bob, we were recently in Nairobi, where you could tell me a little bit of what Uganda is doing in terms of forest finance, approving its national climate change law, which encompasses some provisions for carbon markets. So, I mean, although I really want to hear a little about specifically about that, could you please tell us a little bit about how Uganda has been doing to use debt instruments such and fiscal reforms to unlock forest finance without throwing the macroeconomic stability of the country away?
Thank you very much, Felipe. It's a pleasure indeed to be at the COP30 and to share what Uganda is doing. Maybe just to mention very quickly, the National Red Plus Focal Point for Uganda, and we've journeyed about 16 years until just a couple of days ago, if you might have heard, that we're the first African country to receive Red Plus resource-based payments from the GCF. Just wanted to start with that. So it's quite an experience, and we are building on a number of ongoing sovereign debt instruments in the country to see how we can even mobilize additional financing for forestry. And just also mention that the Ministry of Finance through the climate finance unit that was established a couple of years ago, is the main engine for implementation, and my Ministry of Water and Environment works very closely with them in order to ensure that forestry is within that space without anything being missed out for forestry. And so one of those instruments that we are taking advantage of is the debt for nature, which some people want to call debt for climate swaps, which we are borrowing an experience recently when we signed a debt swap agreement between the government of Uganda and the government of Spain, targeting the health sector. But we were discussing with the Minister of Finance and saying, I think we can build on that. It's possible for us actually to use that successful model in Uganda to replicate a similar debt for nature or debt for climate swaps with creditor governments and development finance institutions to channel predictable resources into restoration of degraded forests, reserves and watersheds, community level forestation and reforestation programs, payment for ecosystem services, including REDD Plus implementation, and also investments in sustainable forest-based livelihoods and climate adaptation. So we want to build on the experience we have so far, having signed the debt for nature swap agreement between our government and the government of Spain. So it's that experience is good for us for forestry. And we're into conversations with the Minister of Finance so that we can see how we can do that for forestry in the country. And those mechanisms, of course, can unlock concessional multi-year climate finance while supporting the National Climate Finance Strategy that we recently launched in 2025, a couple of months ago, but also the REDD Plus Strategy and Action Plan and the medium-term debt strategy that we have for the country. The second sovereign debt instrument is the climate contingent financing and interest waiver clauses. I hope the audience is conversant with that. But you may know that AFD, that's the Agence Francaise de Development, AFD, and the government of Uganda is exploring contingency financing features that would allow the rapid reallocation of undisbursed funds from other sources to respond to emergencies or crises. So if you have a program initiative of financing and you don't disburse the resources, we agree with the creditor government or the funder that we deploy those resources to crises. And some of those crises are forest-related crises, like forest fires, for example. So those are instruments that we can build on as a country, and we think is something we can explore for Uganda because those climate contingence clauses enhance debt resilience and protect physical space during times of emergencies, and aligning, of course, with sovereign borrowing with climate risk management objectives that the developing world, Uganda, actually has at the moment. The third instrument that we want to explore, which is very important, is supporting fiscal and public financial management reforms. To sustain predictable forest finance, Uganda is strengthening the fiscal architecture through targeted reforms. And some of them are the climate and forest budget tagging. We want to tag budgets to forestry interventions to identify and track expenditures across different sectors, including forestry. We also want to ring-fence budget lines and multi-year commitments for forest and climate programs within our medium-term expenditure framework. So that is very important for us as a country, as an instrument that we can use, that we are going to utilize in that context. And also the results-based financing mechanisms, what we call disbursement-linked indicators, DLIs, to tie funding to measurable forest outcomes, such as hectares that have been restored or emissions that have been reduced. So we can use the disbursement-linked indicators. The more you restore, the more we disburse resources to you as a local government, as an entity within government. And we have, of course, the recently signed GCF FAO Uganda government REDD Plus forest project, which we can take advantage of to, as we are disbursing monies for restoration. We use this model of disbursement-linked indicators, for example. It's possible. Thank you.
Hello, hello. Thank you, Bob. I mean, result-based payments, nature for debt swaps. I mean, people here must have lost the track with all the different instruments you're combining, and congratulations for the great work. Daniel, let me shift to you now. From your investor perspective, what structures, incentives, or market conditions are needed to make forests a credible asset class for mainstreaming finance?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Felipe, Bob, for sharing this panel. And I am Daniel Brandão. I'm leading the Nature-Based Solution Unit at Vox Capital. Vox Capital is a pioneer in impact investing here in Brazil. So we've been working with the private market and impact and social and environmental issues since 2009. And currently, we just launched an initiative called CCAT, Catalytic Capital for the Agricultural Transition in Brazil, that we understand that is tackling most of this challenge that we've been seeing or hearing about this morning, but in a very straightforward way. Of course, there is not only one answer to this question, but from our perspective, how we can tackle this, maybe in the short term, we understand that, not really in the short term, sorry, but to really, unlock meaningful amounts of private capital to nature, forests, and sustainable agriculture, we understand that we have to change the risk perception of the market, of how these products or services they really operate. Because when the market doesn't really understand, how an operation will unfold, they charge very high prices, which is not fair. So maybe at the macro or the high level or a systemic ambition that we have currently with this fund there at Vox Capital is changing market perception of risks. How we can do that? We must have some strategies in place to de-risk these tools, services, or instruments, financial instruments that currently we have in the market. So we have to de-risk them. Once de-risking them, we can make room or offer a more comfortable situation for the commercial capital to come and crowd in those financial services. How can we de-risk these instruments? I'm not offering like a very new answer to this recipe, but we need concessional capital. We understand that we need a capital that is aiming or is willing, to take first losses within those services, these financial services. What is concessional capital? Are those capitals that provide, capital under better terms, considering prices, so they're pricing below market standards. They are patient capital, so they have longer tenors, and they are very flexible with the guarantees. I'm not being naive here, because currently these services that we are currently launching, that is CCAT, it's providing concessional capital for the agricultural transition in Brazil. CCAT stands for Catalytic Capital for the Agricultural Transition in Brazil. It's a partnership that we have TNC. TNC was just mentioned here. And we'll be working within the Amazon and the Cerrado biomes, offering concessional capital. We understand that by offering this concessional capital, we can develop a kind of a portfolio of solutions that then we will offer a track record of solutions. And with that track record of solutions, the capital market can learn the basic features of what is on the table when it comes to finance nature. Okay, so at the private level, I understand, but how can we, unlock more concessional capital? Currently, we still rely on the philanthropy, and it's not really a big pocket of money, a big crunch of money, but there is something that we can pilot and we can foster and pursue more capital. But from my perspective, my personal perspective, it's at the macro level, and I'm going to close with this, is that what we really need, and something that is being discussed in this COP, with important leadership from Brazil, from the Brazil government, is a reform on the MDBs, is a reform on the DFIs. Because if you go, and I've been knocking on the doors of many MDBs and many DFIs during the last 1.5 years, and what I've been hearing is that I'm offering too much risk for them. They cannot invest in my structure because they would go not complying with their fiduciary duties. But if I have a DFI that cannot support, concessional capital, so what is the role for? I've been asking, where is the D of your acronym? I can understand the FI, financial institution, but where is the D? Are you really a developmental institution? I don't see it. So these institutions, they are due to many reasons, they are not really taking these concessional positions, and we must change that. So we need this reform to really unlock this concessional capital. And to change, last line, this northern mindset-oriented minds that they have. It's like a post-colonial mindset, that they think they understand about this global south, because we hold most of the tropical forests, and they want to keep power on that through the flow of money. That's why they are very resistant on the change. But we are the global south. We're going to solve that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Daniel. And unfortunately, the government of Brazil is pressing for this issue. We know this is one of the 5 priorities within the Circle Finance, and let's see how they do. You're going to hate me for this because I know we have already scheduled some following up questions, but I would like also to change a little bit the script and maybe open the floor if there's any questions from the audience to our panelists, because I know this is potentially more interesting than my closing remarks. So, yes, please. And present yourself, please.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Marek from Südwind, Austria, and we work on deforestation. And I have a question for Mr. Brandao. How do you get private investors and also countries to invest in things like the TFFF? I mean, you mentioned philanthropy, but what else gets private investors to invest into the TFFF, for example?
Is there another one? Another question? Please.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Katie O'Gara. I'm with the Climate and Land Use Alliance. My question is for Bob. I'm curious, Uganda is a leader in many coalitions around forests, the Forest and Climate Leaders Partnership, but also in the Coalition of Finance Ministers for Climate Action. And I'm curious how the dynamic is between ministries within Uganda to think about this in a holistic way in terms of not just raising money for forests or for climate change, but thinking fundamentally about global governance and how that really interacts with Uganda's fiscal space and fiscal policy.
Thank you. A very interesting question, but we'll just go direct to response. We recently prepared the National Green Taxonomy for the country, alongside the National Climate Finance Strategy. And when you look at the National Green Taxonomy, it highlights how these different ministries should be coordinating in mobilizing finance for climate. And so, in fact, there is a national task force that was formed for the preparation of the taxonomy, but also preparation of the climate finance strategy for the country. Indeed, we are also about to launch the status of climate finance for Uganda. I think in January. If it wasn't for the COP, I think we should have launched it in November. But all those instruments bring together the different ministries. And if I'm to recall, I am part of the task force actually for all those instruments. I represent my ministry, and we have all the other ministries part and parcel of these conversations, and very heated conversations on how the different ministries can mobilize finance that is coordinated by the Climate Finance Unit, and how we can then subject them to our physical instruments that we have in the country, how disbursements, all these discussions have been held between the different ministries. So that is one side of it. But how this links with the global community, I think we're in this space together. I mean, we are part of the global conversations, the World Leaders Climate Summit in Spain and the others. And you know how we deliberated in that, if you can recall, in that event quite well. I think we are connected very greatly with the global instruments and the requirements for us to align with the requirements of the global bodies for climate finance. So I think to me it's just, I mean, you cannot do it without linking it with with the global requirements, because that's the best shot that we can give as a country. Thank you.
Very shortly addressing that question on TFFF. TFFF, it's quite hard to say that name, but I think that the Brazilian government is already doing an amazing work, because maybe a first level of that is really making a buzz, you know, and developing this brand. Everybody's talking about TFFF, and this is super important because it can make TFF attractive, so everybody wants to be part of that. But another level would be, in maybe a more relational perspective, is work with the bankers and the wealth managers, you know, of the global market, so they can really understand how they can bring TFFF into the portfolio of investment that they manage for the wealth people, you know. So this also might be a strategy. And maybe the last one that I could add, and it's connected with the second one, is that we are expecting to have more information about the underlying securities in which TFFF will be investing. So far we have this huge concept, but it's not really clear where this money is going, you know. And this is very important for the market to understand where the money is going, to really have a perception of risk once again. You know, it's quite hard sometimes to sell what we call a blind pool of investments. So once we have this disclosed, I understand that we can also, you know, raise more funds to TFFF.
Lovely. Many thanks, Daniel, Bob, my friend, also for joining us here. It's great to see the perspective, what is being done in Uganda. Also, Daniel, very important to listen from you what it takes in order to make things happen. And my closing remark is only one. I mean, as I said, we need to get all these instruments working together. We need transparency. We do need integrity, but we need to make them happen, and we need to do it with urgency. So let's not get lost within the previous things that I've mentioned. As we know, many other conversations around carbon markets, for instance, are happening at the moment, and it's really important we push for these things to happen. Okay, and thank you very much. I will now handle to my colleague Dirk from UNFCCC.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this second session. I hope I got this under control. My name is Dirk Nemitz. I lead the Agriculture, Forestry and Land Use unit at the UNFCCC Secretariat, and will moderate this session on lessons and the future of REDD+ results-based payments as enabler of forest finance, starting with a short presentation and then... Okay, starting with a short presentation. Now better, but now I get
restoration clear in order to plant a commercial forest.
Market-based and non-market-based results-based payments, of course. Just as a refresher, the Warsaw Framework for REDD+ is a holistic framework for climate mitigation action in the forest sector. It does not only address deforestation and forest degradation, but 5 activities, including conservation, enhancement of carbon stocks, and sustainable management of forests. And in the Paris agreements, parties agreed that countries should have 5 elements that are listed here in place to be eligible for results-based payments: an assessed reference level, safeguards information, let's try this one. Is that better?
It's a little bit low, yeah.
Okay. Sorry, there's a few technical challenges in this conference. So we have 5 elements in place to be eligible for results-based payments: an assessed reference level, safeguards information, national forest monitoring system, and a national REDD+ strategy and verified REDD+ results. At COP28, 2 years ago, parties agreed on the global stocktake, which informs NDCs. This included language on the need for enhanced action and support for halting and reversing deforestation and forest degradation by 2030 using the REDD+ framework. And for the first time, we had a goal on deforestation agreed in the UNFCCC decision text. After a decade of REDD+ implementation, we have 65 countries that have reported at least one of the elements to UNFCCC and have actively engaged in the implementation. And in total, these countries now have 12 gigatons of results reported and eligible for results-based payments submitted by 21 countries. And this is going further. Last year, there were several strong long-term signals for REDD+ results-based finance. The Green Climate Fund adopted a new policy integrating REDD+ results-based payments into the fund's regular project activity. They require that all of the requirements at the national level are being met. And also the 6.4 supervisory body for carbon markets under the UNFCCC established that project-level REDD+ activities, once methodologies are agreed, must link to the country's national REDD+ reporting, so they can't undermine it or be separate from that completely. However, to access such sources, it would be very important to consider timelines and plan ahead for the countries. For example, countries that wish to update their REDD+ reference level to be eligible because maybe they don't fulfill all of the requirement of the Green Climate Fund currently, they will need to make the new submission of the reference level by 12th January 2026 in order to include then later, after the assessment of the reference level, the results in their second biennial transparency report, which is due end of December 2026. So it's a bit rigid in the system, but it's something that parties can plan ahead for if they know. We don't have the time today to go into the details of what we are doing next in starting a community of practice on REDD+, but there's a lot more to say on where the Secretariat is heading. There's a newsletter you can link up for, and if you like to learn more, I would also like you to invite you to a dedicated REDD+ side event tomorrow and Tuesday next week at 11 a.m. in special event room Parana. But now we would like to hear from countries that have gone through the whole process, that have all of the elements in place, and that have some experience with REDD+ results-based payments. And on the panel from Costa Rica, Costa Rica was among the first countries submitting a REDD+ reference level in 2016. The country also already reported REDD+ results and has submitted an updated reference level earlier this year and is going currently through the assessment of another set of results. I have Tilma Navarrete, Executive Director of the National Forest Financing Fund, FONAFIFO, and from Indonesia, which also submitted the first REDD+ reference level in 2016 and updated it once in 2022 and has reported results in all of the elements for REDD+. I have Professor Haruni Krishnavati, Senior Advisor to the Minister for Climate Change. I would like to start with Gilmar, and I will get some support with the translation. Costa Rica has been a pioneer in implementing results-based payments under REDD+. Maybe I'll try the other side, then I'm further away from the speaker. What have been the key enabling conditions that allowed you to access and effectively use the funds? So.
Okay, Dick. Good morning. I will speak in Spanish. Sorry, apologize. Costa Rica ha sido un país pionero en los mecanismos de pago por servicios ambientales y nuestras condiciones habilitantes, por ejemplo, ha sido la institucionalidad, un Ministerio de Ambiente y Energía y un Fondo Nacional de Financiamiento Forestal.
Costa Rica has been the pioneer in the implementation of results-based payments, and the enabling conditions have been the basis to establishing this. ¿Y qué más?
Además, contamos con un programa sólido, consolidado de pago por servicios ambientales que tiene 28 años de operar, que ha permitido promover transparente y eficazmente los recursos a los dueños de bosques y plantaciones forestales.
And we count with payments for environmental services program that has been working for 28 years and has been fundamental to channel resources to the ground.
Otra condición habilitante es la confianza que los dueños de los bosques y principalmente los territorios indígenas tienen del mecanismo, tienen del Fondo Nacional de Financiamiento Forestal, FONAFIFO.
One of the important thing is the trust that landowners and people in Costa Rica have on FONAFIFO, which is the forest finance mechanism.
Otra condición habilitante es la paciencia y el convencimiento, porque el proceso de red fue muy largo. Costa Rica esperó 12 años para firmar los primeros contratos con el Fondo Verde del Clima y con el Banco Mundial.
Another very important thing has been the patience that people in Costa Rica has had with this process. We've been working in this for 12 years, and it took very long, as you may understand, to get these results achieved on the funds channel. So this has been also very important.
That's all.
Thank you very much. I know, Haruni, I know that you have to leave a few minutes earlier, unfortunately, so I would like to combine the first two questions into one. So Indonesia has also received significant REDD+ results-based payments. What lessons have emerged from your experience in meeting the technical and institutional requirements for accessing these funds? And what role do the national forest and climate policy play in Indonesia's broader climate finance strategy?
Thank you, Dick, and greetings to all colleagues. Indonesia's journey on the REDD+ result-based payment has been both challenging and also rewarding. It has shown us that achieving the verified emission reduction is not just a technical precision, but it's also the building the trust, institutions, and also sustainable partnerships. And allow me to share some reflection from our experience. First, regarding the lesson learned. Indonesia has received the significant result-based payment through bilateral and also multilateral mechanisms, including our partnership with the Green Climate Fund and also with the Norway and also the World Bank Carbon Fund. And from this experience, one of the key lessons stand out that the integrity begins with data. We learn the importance how establishing the robust and transparent, and also in terms of the developing national forest monitoring system (MRV), we stand with international standard. And our forest reference level that we have submitted to UNFCCC has been technically assessed and also provide that the strong foundation, and of course coupled with the continuous improvement on our forest monitoring system and continuously improve in terms of methodology, and has been the build the international confidence how the Indonesian emission reduction result. And the second lesson is about the value of institutional clarity. Assessing the result-based payment require not only good data but also the good governance. And Indonesia institutional framework involving our Ministry of Forestry. In the past, the Ministry of Forestry and Ministry of Environment become one of ministry and now split into two. And of course, we also established the Indonesia Environmental Fund that ensure that the role for each institution is clear and the coordination is strong, and funds can be delivered transparently from the national to the local level. And we learned that the technical readiness must be matched with the policy consistency, and local ownership. And our achievement in emission reduction are a direct outcome for a long-standing policy, including the moratorium of primary forest and also the peatland conversion. And then we also having the social forestry program and peatland and mangrove restoration program that's all create the enabling the condition of REDD+ to work. And how the payments actually has influenced the national policy and climate finance. REDD+ finance has reinforced Indonesia policy credibility and ambition. It has demonstrated that measurable results can be achieved at scale, and that forest-based payment or mitigation is central to our national strategy. And this has strengthened our commitment, including the Indonesia Follow Net Sink 2030 target, where the forestry and other land use sector has been the main central, and to achieve by 2030, it has to be like net sink. And institutionally, we have Indonesia Environment Fund that have managed the fund coming from the result-based payment from REDD+, and through this agency, the fund will be channeled to the beneficiary for climate mitigation activity through the mechanism that designed to ensure the transparency and credibility. And I think at the strategic level, REDD+ Finance also led the groundwork for our new carbon economic policy enacted through our new presidential regulation 110 to 2025, which is now setting up for all mechanism, including REDD+ based payment and also carbon market. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Haruni. I think this shows Indonesia is a very large and very beautiful country, and you need lots of initiatives on the ground that work, but how you effectively link this with a national policy and with priorities set at the national level so that things are working for on the ground and at the national level together. I would like to briefly go back to Gilmar with a second question. How has REDD Finance in Costa Rica contributed to broader forest governance and gender equality outcomes, particularly in relation to community engagement and co-benefits for women?
Con el financiamiento de REDD hemos logrado atender la demanda insatisfecha de propiedades que quieren acceder al programa de pago por servicios ambientales, que no han podido justamente por limitaciones presupuestarias.
With the finance from REDD+, we have been able to attend the demand from landowners that could not access the PSA program, and mainly with budget limitations.
En cuanto al tema de género, los recursos nos permitieron generar un plan de acción de género para identificar las brechas en el sector ambiental.
And in regards to the gender plan, this has been instrumental to this has indicators and goals for each politics and within the REDD+ national strategy, and has allowed us to address little by little the priorities within this strategy.
Con estos recursos hemos promovido acciones para aquellos dueños de finca que no tienen bosque y que no podían verse beneficiados de los recursos. Hemos creado 2 fondos de crédito, uno para mujeres y otro para hombres, mujeres, indígenas y el resto de los actores involucrados.
So with this, the government has created 2 different funds, one for inclusive of sustainable development aimed for women, and the second one called actually green business, that is meant for women, men, and other organizations that does not have access to credit.
En los territorios indígenas hemos desarrollado planes ambientales forestales territoriales, que es un programa creado por los indígenas donde establecen cómo van a invertir los recursos y principalmente le ha dado el empoderamiento a las mujeres que han participado en la construcción de este mecanismo.
So in the indigenous territories, we have created environmental, forestry, and territorial plans that have enabled women and local communities to be involucrated in the process of decision making about their forests and the territories.
La aplicación de las salvaguardas en los procesos relacionados a red nos han permitido la inserción de las mujeres en las actividades, ligadas a las actividades de su territorio, donde ellos han podido establecer cómo quieren utilizar los recursos que vayan a recibir de las finanzas climáticas.
The application of environmental and social safeguards have been instrumental for this process, so they have enabled the application of activities and have permitted the women and landowners to understand how these resources will be applied and be part of these decisions.
En Costa Rica tenemos 24 territorios indígenas y de ellos 20 ya tienen planes ambientales forestales territoriales. Hemos logrado con estos recursos casi que el 80% de nuestros territorios ya tengan un plan de inversión.
In Costa Rica, we have 24 indigenous territories, and 20 of them already have an established plan. And so we have managed to have already covered 80% of all territories indigenous with plans in this regard.
Estos planes incluyen prioridades que las mismas mujeres indígenas establecieron, como el fortalecimiento de capacidades, salud, seguridad alimentaria, empoderamiento, liderazgo, derecho indígena y proyectos de producción sostenible, entre otros.
These plans include the priorities that have been identified by women that include health, food security, capacity building, leadership, indigenous rights, and sustainable production.
La participación de las mujeres en los territorios es un elemento muy importante. Todos los organismos de control que se han desarrollado para ejecutar estos recursos, más del 50% tiene a mujeres que llevan ese control dentro del territorio.
So the involvement of women in this process is very important. Almost half of these mechanisms have almost all of these mechanisms have half of their participation that includes women within them.
Thank you very much. This is very, very important experience from Costa Rica. And I remember when the safeguards were negotiated, there was a lot of talk about how intrusive this is and how difficult it is. But you show that if you adapt them to your national circumstances, it's very valuable to implement them and bring everybody on board in the work on forests. Aruni, we want to come to the next question, and that's also interesting. In the priorities for improving the effectiveness and impact of future RED+, especially in relation to jurisdictional approaches and private sector engagement, what are Indonesia's plan? How are you trying to bring them all on board?
Okay, thank you. I think following our new regulation on carbon economic value that just released recently, our priorities are clear. The first is we would like to strengthen our jurisdictional approach to RED+, and the lesson learned from East Kalimantan emission reduction program can be scaled up to nationwide, and we also to ensure the action from the provincial level can be nested into national accounting system with transparent data flow, and also ensuring credible baseline and ensuring consistent safeguard. And the second, we aim to make that RED+ result-based payment or RED+ finance can be make more inclusive and also equitable. The benefit sharing mechanism are improved to ensure that those who has been work or manage forest sustainability, including communities, indigenous people, and local government are directly rewarded And the third, we would like to open the door for private sector government to the private sector to contribute on the carbon economic value. That's now I think it's the regulation, with new regulation, it's clear that the government opened the wide door for companies to participate on the emission reduction projects, including restoration effort and sustainable supply chains. And now Indonesia is turning REDD+ finance from the donor-driven model into the true investment ecosystem where public and private sector can contribute on this project.
Thank you, Haruni. And I know that you have to leave very, very soon. So I have one last question. What are some good practices that Indonesia can share on how its REDD+ payments have helped to support the implementation of the country's national approach to environmental and social safeguards as well?
Thank you, Dick. And maybe final question. Allow me to highlight some good practices that help operationalize our national approach to environmental and social safeguard. The first thing, that Indonesia safeguard information system aligned with the Congo safeguard, reflecting Indonesia national laws and local realities. Through these REDD+ stakeholders, including local people and indigenous communities, including society, can track how safeguards are applied, and this will ensure the transparency. As we know that transparency is the fundamental things to building the trust. And REDD+ result-based payment has also strengthened our inclusive participation, benefit sharing mechanism that incorporate social and environmental things, including the gender consideration, including the women's group and local communities, where they could be actively involved in planning, monitoring, and also in terms of implementing livelihood activities. And we see that the safeguards as an enabler of sustainability. They ensure that REDD+ delivers real climate benefits while advancing social equity and also environmental integrity. So if I may conclude that the story of Indonesia REDD+ is one, it's about the readiness and then integrity and ownership. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Haruni. Was a pleasure to have you here. There's a lot of experience, and on the one hand, I think Indonesia has come a very long way. On the other hand, it feels like there's still so much to do. So I'm very much looking forward to do that together and have further collaboration with all organizations on this. And thank you very much.
Yeah. We are looking forward for future collaboration with other tropical forest countries on REDD+. Thank you.
Unfortunately, there was something coming up, as it always does during the COP, so Haruni has to leave us a few minutes early. Give us a round of applause for Haruni. Thank you again. Thank you very much. We have a few more minutes left, and I think I have a final question for you that goes into, if you look into the future, what innovations or reforms are needed to sustain and scale results-based payments in Costa Rica's forest sector? How can we upscale this successful model to get more?
Ok, nosotros estamos haciendo la tarea hoy, nuestro futuro es hoy. Ya estamos implementando el pago por servicios ambientales 2.0 en Costa Rica y además estamos llevando los mecanismos hacia la parte marina y el sector agropecuario.
So we are in Costa Rica are already doing we have been doing our thing for a while, but we're still doing it. And at the moment we are implementing the Environmental Systems Program 2.0, and we are also establishing a mechanism for the marine sector and for the agricultural sector.
Dentro de esas acciones futuras es mantener la búsqueda de nuevas fuentes de financiamiento basado en otros servicios, no solo carbono, sino que ya empezamos a explorar biodiversidad, agua y hasta el suelo.
So when we look to the future, we look forward to also maintaining and opening opportunities for finance, and not only in terms of carbon, and also for the other environmental services.
Y algo muy importante en nuestro país es mantener las alianzas público-privadas para seguir trayendo recursos para la protección del bosque.
And also very important thing in our country is to maintain the public-private alliances to continue bridging resources to our country.
A nivel internacional, Costa Rica seguirá insistiendo en que el lenguaje de los instrumentos de la Convención no deje por fuera las acciones basadas en naturaleza.
And at an international level, Costa Rica has been pushing for the negotiations not to exclude nature from the standards being settled.
Por último, pero no menos importante, les cuento que junto con el PNUD estamos construyendo una nota de concepto para presentarlo al Fondo Verde del Clima para la próxima ventana de financiamiento.
Lastly, but not less important, together with the support of UNDP, we're developing a proposal to submit for the Green Climate Fund for the new cycle of results-based payments.
Quiero agradecer a ONU Red y al PNUD por invitarme a participar de este evento tan importante.
I want to thank UNRED and UNDP for inviting me to participate in this very important event.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I see that the session is very dynamic. We got Haruni back with us. Thank you for making the time. I think we heard a lot about how things can improve in the future, but how things are also, how we're having a very, very complex field for forest finance. So I thank you very much for sharing the experience. Is there maybe one or two questions for the audience to, I think we have two of the most advanced and most experienced REDD+ countries here, something that is burning under your nails that you would like to ask to Haruni or Hilma?
Good morning. Our company was hired by GCF to do the REDD+ study in Latin America, and we also work in Indonesia. And I can say that Costa Rica is the model to follow by far in the region. But I have a question, because Gilmar was humble because Costa Rica has much to say. But we would like to know if you have been consulted by GCF for the second window of result-based payments. Have you? Yeah, both of you, Haruni and Gilmar. Thank you.
Gilmar, you want to start? The question is, have you been consulted by the GCF for this new cycle of result-based payments?
Okay.
Si el GCF los está consultando para este nuevo ciclo de pagos por resultados, pero vos de cierta forma ya lo dijiste.
Sí, de alguna manera ya hemos venido trabajando una nueva propuesta en alianza con PNUD y vamos a tener ese acercamiento con la gente del Fondo Verde del Clima.
So yeah, as I've said, we are already working on a proposal together with the support of UNDP to submit to the Green Climate Fund. So yeah, we are already engaged in this cycle.
Thank you. That was a great question. I think Indonesia actually would like to take the opportunity for the next cycle. And at the moment, we are trying to work closely with our colleagues from the UNDP, how we could prepare for the concept note and based on our lesson learned from the previous. And this is, I think, will be good opportunity for all tropical REDD+ country to apply for it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I also remember that there were two workshops by the GCF on a technical level with representatives from all regions talking about the conditions and how to set up the new window. So this has happened last year, and that's led to the adoption of the new policy by the GCF board. We're at the end of our session. I thank you both very, very much. I think it's important to have these kind of sessions so that other countries can also, they can learn more from you than they can learn from me or from UNFCCC or even UNDP. So I think it's very important to create these spaces where knowledge and experience can be shared. And we want to do more of that because we really need to halt and reverse deforestation by 2030, because it's important for the climate. It's an important agreement in the UNFCCC, and it's very encouraging to see advancement in this field. With that, I would like to thank the audience. Maybe we can give another positive applause for the panelists, and then I hand back to Felipe.
Good morning again. My name is Christina Koch. I'm an indigenous Ekchi Maya leader from southern Belize, and I have the honor of moderating this dynamic panel discussion. We're going to look at private sector finance and indigenous-led bioeconomy. Okay. Perhaps just to set the context, we all know that indigenous peoples are frontline guardians to tropical forests. We have been sustaining global climate solutions and stability, biodiversity, and water systems since time immemorial. And still, indigenous peoples are one of the populations that receive a very negligible share of international environmental finance. And their bioeconomy solutions are often overlooked by the market sector and mainstream markets. And so today I have a panelist of dynamic speakers here with me, where we're going to explore the bridges that can be built between indigenous territories and the private sector, looking at how there have been initiatives that have catalyzed rights-based sustainable investment in forests and bioeconomy initiatives. And so let me start by introducing our panelists today. I have to my immediate left Ms. Rica Sombolingi. Sorry if I butchered that. Rica is a really good friend of mine, so I've known her for a long time, and she's well known. She's one of the first female Secretary General of Amman, so congratulations. This is one of the world's largest indigenous peoples organization, and Rica hails from Toraja in Indonesia. And she's renowned, of course, for her dynamic speeches and long life commitment to indigenous people's rights. Rica's involvement in the movement traces back to her parents hosting meetings in the early 1990s. And of course, she continues to serve as a program specialist for UNDP, for the Indigenous Peoples Program, Regional Indigenous Peoples Program. So welcome, Rica. And then we have as well, and I apologize in advance if I don't say your name properly, Kautar. Okay, Kautar Zarauli. Okay. Who serves as the global lead for nature and climate at the United Nations Capital Development Fund, and who oversees the global nature and climate portfolio. In her capacity, she leads efforts to operationalize the United Nations Capital Development Fund's global nature and climate portfolio, and in this capacity, She's been able to leverage blended finance and local development finance to nature-positive, climate-resilient economies in the least developing countries and in fragile contexts. So welcome, and we look forward to hearing from you. And then our final panelist, which I just learned has an indigenous name, beautiful name, Yane Amoras. She's the head of legal research and at the Amazon Investor Coalition, and is a lawyer and legal consultant specializing in business relations and human rights, holds a degree from the Federal University of Para, and has experience as a volunteer lawyer at the Federal Public Defender's Office in Belém. I want to welcome all of you, and I look forward to hearing from you. I know we don't have a lot of time, so this is going to be sort of an elevator pitch kind of moment as opposed to a much longer discussion. But I have prepared a couple questions, and this is really to understand the importance of really exploring how we could build linkages between private sector and indigenous communities who are already providing bioeconomy solutions. A lot of times people think that indigenous communities are without economies, but we've always had exchanges. We've always had indigenous exchange systems, which is our economy as indigenous peoples, whether we're trading products or labor or seeds. Those are our exchange systems. And so we have seen most recently a lot of indigenous peoples beginning to really innovate and look at climate solutions by creating these bioeconomies. How do we, let us explore the bridges that can be built then in that regard with private sector. And so maybe if I start with Rica, I have two questions for you. What would you say are some of the key characteristics of indigenous economies? And what are indigenous organizations like AMAN doing to develop and strengthen this? And what are some ways in which allies or institutions like UNDP or other UN bodies, how can we support indigenous economy efforts?
It's just very loud. Okay. Yeah, this is very challenging for me because I'm not used to this kind of environment where there's so many noise outside around me. Sometimes I'm very easily agitated, distracted, yeah? And I'm really sorry if I later or maybe get lost, and especially also because I will be speaking in English. My interpreter is taking a break. They've been working really hard since early morning. So please apologize for that. Kuresumanga, terima kasih. Thank you very much for this opportunity. And I appreciate UNDP for taking this momentum and bring together all of us here. And especially, let's say hello. I heard this is on the live streaming. So those who are watching us is not only in this room, but also across the globe. I hope my sister, brothers, and relatives in Indonesia still waking up and watching us here. And I hope they can understand. We call this, I'm speaking in Bahasa Sekongkol, meaning in language they don't understand, but hopefully later on I will translate to them. So, hi, hello Indonesia, salam Nusantara. Where is the camera? It's over there, I think, yeah? Oh, hi, hello Indonesia. We've been working on this indigenous economy. I think it's sometimes what we heard in the last few years. We call indigenous economy alternatives. We call indigenous economy, well, it's evolving terms that we used to call indigenous economy. We call it sustainable economy. We call it a circular economy. We call it bioeconomy. we call it regenerative economy, we call it restorative economy. So it's so many different things that we use to call indigenous economy. But I think indigenous economy, as the nature of indigenous economy, it's not alternative because it's been there. I think that's the most ancient economic system. And where economic, in indigenous worldview, we don't distinguish, we don't have boundaries between what the modern world of us today call it economic, social, political, cultural, whatever you may call it, because it's all interrelated and interconnected. So indigenous economy, it's absolutely based on indigenous territory. Yeah, it's from our land, it's from our resources. And resources is not just natural, but there are also other resources like the knowledge, practice that we have passed through generations. We don't talk about one generation, about 10 years or 100 years, but really through generations. And these knowledge and practice and traditions have been evolving, and still relevant and exist because we have what so-called innovations, right? We innovate through the centuries, through the generations. And this economic is very much related to our identity as indigenous peoples, our cultural identity, our belief system, social and political, through the governance system, through the indigenous legal system. All the relationship is regulated through indigenous legal system. And these are not small. In fact, big, because some are, we cannot evaluate with money. What we have also facing in the last, now especially, is what we call economy is something that can be exchanged with money. But those are just the small things. Yeah, the most valuable economy is the one that we cannot evaluate with money. And I think that's the difference of a modern economy and indigenous economy. I would like to draw out some of the talking of the superficial part of it, which is economic valuations. We in Aman, we took the risk because as indigenous movement over decades, we are always against economic money valuations of our indigenous economy, because we say it's not just about money, it's beyond money, right? There's solidarity, there's collective actions. How do we share the responsibility but also the benefit from our indigenous economic system? But in 2018, I think that was the first decision we made, and we evaluate the indigenous economy in five indigenous people's territory across Indonesia. So we have, I wanted to draw one examples from Papua, from West Papua, Moikalim, where resources that they harvest from the sustainable management of our indigenous resources is about 120,000 US dollar a year. That's what I call the superficial thing, the little thing that we can evaluate. This not including the environmental service like water, like tourism, like the happiness when we close to our nature. So this is just the thing that we can, for example, the direct access, food, yeah, medicines, you know, all these things, that 120,000 a year. And we do this across the Indonesia, and the number is huge. In Indonesia today, in Aman, we develop what we call indigenous enterprise. We have nearly 100 indigenous groups, economic groups at local level that involve women, youth, and also the foundations, economic foundations for our indigenous schools in Indonesia, and also the place where what we call the homecoming movement of indigenous youth who coming back from the city to our indigenous territory so they can sustain our life, their life. They don't, because when we go home, people will call us failure. When we go back home, they say, I've sent you to the school. I have you to university. I've sent you to university. I worked so hard to make you graduated. And why are you coming home? You are such a failure. But this initiative, getting them into indigenous business, making them confidence and believe in themselves, and they can use that as a platform to also convince the community that we are not a failure, that our indigenous, the net worth of our indigenous economy is also big. Yeah? And they also contribute to organizations, to Aman. So these are the things. Our challenge today is we don't want to be just dictated by the market. Yeah? We want to be valued as indigenous economy that is not cheap. And indigenous economy cannot be mass productions, because mass production will put pressure on our environment, on our forest, on our social cohesiveness. For example, yeah, I'm wearing this today. This is all from the natural dyes. This shouldn't be cheap. Why? Because this is only made as part of the life circle of indigenous in 1 year. And this is by indigenous women who's weaving only during when they wait from the planting up to the harvest. So they only have around 5 or 3 months to do this every year. And this is started by rituals, by praying, by mantras. And this is also coming from the leaves, from the soils, from the fruits. So if they have to multiply this because there is huge market demand, for example, let's say they only make, one woman can only make like 10 or 5 1 year. And let's multiply by 5. Meaning, the time of the woman will be dragged out from other activities. She can be ended up rejected by the community because she cannot involve in other collective activities anymore. She will harm the forest because she needs to harvest 5 times more than it used to be. So the carrying capacity of our environment is decaying. So I think this is supposed to be put into our considerations, and that's where we need the bridge. Yeah, we need the bridge where we can facilitate and tell the stories of how indigenous economy is not just about money, but supporting them will also sustain our environment and sustain us as a human being. And I think that's the contributions of indigenous peoples in this climate crisis to all of us. Kurasumanga, thank you very much.
Excellently put. I think that was, I couldn't do better in describing exactly what indigenous economies are. Really, to indigenous peoples, it is about relationship to each other, but also relationship to Mother Earth. And our entire exchange systems are embedded in our cosmovision, as you rightfully put it. And that's why the conventional markets and market structures were not conceptualized in that same way, not valuing the authenticity of the work and the artisanry of indigenous peoples. And as Ruka rightfully put it, it is also the transmission of traditional knowledge. Our knowledge, our cosmovision lives within our weaves, within our designs, you know. And so thank you, Ruka, for enlightening us. I think that really sums up really what indigenous innovations are about, what indigenous exchange systems are about. And so now we come to our second panelist, and we would like to hear how can blended finance and partnerships with national and subnational institutions help to localize nature finance, ensuring that capital effectively reaches indigenous peoples, local communities, and MSMEs, driving conservation and sustainable value chains? Can you help us to answer that question?
I'll try. Hello, my name is Kautar Zerweli, and I work for United Nations Capital Development Fund. I'm the global lead for nature and climate. Our mandate is to look at empowering the local economy to support nature, because supporting businesses by nature, that they look at the nature as a resource. So we work to support them to look at nature as an asset. So how can we transform the thinking of nature to something that gives us access to something that we need to take care of while we're still sustaining the local economy? So in UNCDF, our mission is to support the last mile, to support this informal economy becomes formal, to support these small businesses to grow and sustain. How do we do that? We do that but what we call de-risking. So we have a methodology with what we call it a blended finance. We work with small businesses that commercial banks find too risky to work with. We provide them with technical assistance as well as injection of capital. The blended finance comes in when we talked about the injection of capital, because it can be a combination of operating grants, a reimbursable grant, as well as low interest loans. And why do we do that? This is how we build their commercial viability and how we make them interested in the commercial banks. So our help is to work with them so that we can hand over to the commercial banks and DFIs and scale them up. I want to share an example. A good example of our initiative is in Kibera Foundation in Burundi. Together with our partners, we helped establish the Kibera Foundation. Kibera forest is really a symbol in Burundi of rebellions, is a symbol of where we go and poach illegally the animals, and then we use the trees. So what we did here, we worked with the Kibera Foundation, a national conservation entity, to co-manage the park alongside with indigenous Betwa communities. Under this framework, we supported the first ever public-private partnership in Burundi, where we supported a private sector to come in and work with the Betwa communities and change the view of the forest to ecotourism. So we helped create a 10-year payment for ecosystem services agreement where we provided a grant to the private sector of $1 million. But why we did that? We helped create that in 10 years, this the 1 million grant will be $150,000 for the next 10 years come back to support the local communities. So in 10 years, it's going to be the 1 million grant that we gave to the private sector. So this innovative model really links clean energy production to forest conservation, creating a predictable, sustainable, long-lasting, while investing private sector proceeds in forest reservation, but also supporting the indigenous communities to have a long-lasting income as well. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I think that, I think all of us in the room know that one of the biggest contentions has always been indigenous peoples with private sector, particularly private sector that's exploitative, that does view our nature and our environment as resource and not assets. So I really like that. And I think indigenous peoples are very, very clear that everything on our land is a part of our identity. It's a part of our collective well-being. And so our relationship is reciprocal, right? What we take, we give back. And I think that is how we have innovated and built our economies. And so this is a really wonderful example of how we could de-risk and how we could make sure that there's equitable benefit sharing from the private sector, from the investors, but also to the communities itself. So thank you for sharing that. And then to our final panelist, Yanni, how does the Amazon Investor Coalition support indigenous entrepreneurship on the ground? And how does the work ensure that partners such as indigenous peoples and local communities are treated fairly in terms of contracting, in terms of protection of their rights and intellectual property?
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. I would talk a little bit about Amazon Investor Coalition. We are a global platform that unites philanthropy, investors, and corporate buyers to support regenerative economies in the Amazon Basin and support the rule of law. So we understand ourselves a non-profit grantor. We give grants to Amazonian-led initiatives, and we also give our strategic advisory support to catalyze the social bioeconomy, to strengthen the rule of law, to strengthening the carbon market's integrity, to increase and improve innovative finance for the Amazon, and also to elevate Amazonian voices through global campaigns. Specifically, when we talk about bioeconomy, we do not work only with the indigenous people of the Amazon, we work also with the traditional communities here. And we found the support certification and traceability systems for Amazon bioeconomy, such as Origens Brasil, is an initiative led by Imaflora here in Brazil. We will also develop a procurement program and a showroom based in New York to promote and exhibit Amazon products to relevant buyers. And we allocate small grants to bioeconomy initiatives that we mapped locally. So we want to support local initiatives that usually doesn't have access to other type of funds. And we support impact funds for the Amazonian bioeconomy. One of them usually we call Impact Bank. We work together with them. And also, in my side, as was said in the beginning, I'm a lawyer, and I lead our rule of law program, and it's a big concern of ourselves about if the bioeconomy will be fair and will bring like real goods for the communities and the indigenous, if they will respect the cultural and their time in the territory. So, on my side, we want to promote initiatives that want to promote system change and not just work locally, because we know that we don't have too much time in our biome to try to stop the tipping point. It's a fact that we have. And we want to promote strategies that will help not just one group or one community, that can make a difference in a longer term. So Right now, we have a grantee that is a human rights collective in the Tapajós region here in the state of Pará. They give popular legal assistance for traditional community and for indigenous people, the Munduruku people here in Pará. Right now, they mainly work with land tenure issues because it's a big issues here in the Amazon. But also, we want to support them to the lawyers to learn more about fair contract. Because right now, if a big company wants to work sustainably and with responsibility here in the Amazon, they need to contract lawyers from São Paulo, that is very far from here, from the Amazon, to work with the indigenous and traditional communities. And this is not the best idea because they do not know the territory. They don't know the context, the culture, and our history as well. We are very unknown from the rest of Brazil. And we are trying to promote more capacity for these local lawyers to work together with the community. Also, we are trying to build a partnership to give capacity building for indigenous lawyer students. So for them, from the university, to learn more about the indigenous needs and how to work with the communities. Because for the community, when we talk about fair contracts, to have a fair contract, before to write the contract, you need to give conditions, enabling conditions to have a fair negotiation.
Right.
And how can we give fair conditions for negotiation? The community need to understand what they are doing.
And have the same capacity.
And the same capacity, because in the law, we say private actors, they have the same capacity, but in the real life, it doesn't happen. So yeah, we need more indigenous lawyers and traditional leaders that understand these legal terms. Also, we need the private sector understand, as Rica said, money per money is not enough. And especially here in the Amazon, just money brought us more problems than solutions. So we need the private sector to shift their mentality and the logic.
Yeah.
They need to understand they're not negotiating with the big centers. I will give again the example of São Paulo. They are not negotiating a market with a business of São Paulo. They are doing negotiations with a different people that have a different mentality and logic and time time to understand. And in ASC, we also are supporting research. We launched a guide for sustainable investment in the Amazon. And one of the things that we say all the time is the logic here is different. And to have a really sustainable business and a fair business, you need to shift the solutions that you have from outside of the region and co-create the solutions with the community. That's the way to build fair contracts. And in AIC, we don't give legal assistance because we are non-profit. We can give advisory for other NGOs. And we want to create an ecosystem that can give this legal assistance from the ground. And for me, this is more important. I'm from Belém, I'm from the Amazon, and I work a long time with contracts, but we don't know, even me, I didn't study how to deal and how to build a fair contract with the community. So it's a new thing that we still need to study, we still need to research, and we need to co-create with the indigenous to really have a fair bioeconomy and a just bioeconomy for the indigenous. Thank you.
Amazing. I promised you an amazing panelist, and they have delivered. I think it's really important. I think it's really important to recognize that this has to be partnerships with the private sector. It cannot be a situation of where indigenous communities or peoples are seen as beneficiaries or as poor people that need to be helped, right? We're not with our hands out. We are really asking to have a space at the table and build equitable partnerships, one that's rights-based, that protects our rights, one that is grounded in free, prior, informed consent processes, which I think is really important, and one that builds on a trust that we are in this joint venture together, that it is reciprocal. And I think that these are, of course, novel models, right? And we have to continuously break down the systems that don't provide for these kinds of relationships with indigenous peoples, because at the end of the day, as Rica put it, we have faced a lot of exploitation on our lands. We have lost a lot. And we recognize that as we build in these accountability processes, these due diligence processes, we have to also build our own capacity to learn how to build these contracts that are just, that are equitable, that allow for grievance redress, for instance, or that allow for us to be able to say, well, this partnership is no longer working out, right? And I think that that fundamentally is what indigenous peoples are trying to protect as we build these sustainable value chains. I know we're running quickly out of time, but I wanted to take a couple minutes just to highlight a pioneering initiative that the UNDP is actually working on. We've been developing what is called the Forest Guardians Investment Accelerator. It's an initiative that is under the UN Climate Promise, and the objective is to connect indigenous communities with responsible private companies, investors, philanthropies, and other partnerships. There's two examples that I would like to highlight, and I know my friend and colleague Nina from UNDP was supposed to share this with all of you, and so I want to take advantage of really sharing it and highlighting it, because I think it's a really good example and a step in the right direction. There are two collaborators right now that we offer as examples. There's a collaboration with Lavaza Foundation and of course with the Amazon Investor Coalition. Essentially what they're trying to do is to demonstrate how responsible finance can empower indigenous stewardship of forest while advancing climate action and biodiversity and equitable goals. See, at the end of the day, indigenous peoples are not about just finding money, but really recognizing that we have to create sustainable well-being for our people based on our relationship with our land and our and the assets on our lands. But we have to make sure that we are partnering with responsible companies. And so I think it's really important for entities like the UN bodies, like UNDP, to really help us to bridge that gap, to make the connections, to look at the collaborations with investors and private sector that really have a common interest and a common agenda with us. So I hope that I have done justice to sharing and highlighting that really pioneering initiative. We look forward to advancing it and of course building partnerships across with private sector. So thank you again. I want to thank you, all three of you, for sharing with us these wonderful examples of how we can continue to make the link with private sector and, of course, at the same time protecting rights and ensuring sustainability and land management. So thank you very much, and thanks to the audience for being patient with us and staying with us. I know we're on the lunch hour. Of course, if there are any questions, if you'd like to talk to any of the panelists, they're here. Unfortunately, I think we're out of time. I don't know what the... We can take a question? Okay. All right. We have time for a question. Un cuestión.
Uno, dos. ¿Usted me traduce? Bueno, mi nombre es Levi Sucre, soy indígena Bribri de Costa Rica y junto a Rica conversamos estos temas en la Alianza Global de la Bioeconomía. Y quería decir, lo primero es que los pueblos indígenas sí podemos integrar en nuestra cosmovisión el tema de economía o bioeconomía. Y lo segundo es que normalmente los diálogos no son iguales entre las empresas y los pueblos indígenas. Los pueblos indígenas siempre conversamos de buena fe, pero no siempre las empresas conversan con nosotros de buena fe. Y es ahí donde necesitamos aliados que nos ayuden a entender estas relaciones en la bioeconomía y contratos.
Good morning, afternoon. My name is Levi Sucre, and I'm from the Global Alliance of Territorial Communities and also the General Director of the Mesoamerican Alliance of Peoples and Forests. And we have been talking a lot this with Rica, and I have 2 points that I want to share. And the first is that indigenous peoples, we can integrate in our cosmovision the bioeconomy. That is the first thing. The two thing is that all the dialogues that we have with these investors or the private sector is always in good faith, but most of the time we do not receive the same, right, from the other part. So he said that in that point is where we need the allies to understand how we can make these connections, how we can break these barriers, because we are always doing that in good faith, but how we can partnership together.
Esto pasa mucho con los contratos de mercado de carbonos privados. Nos sucede muchísimo a los pueblos.
And yeah, a really good example with this is with the carbon market contracts, and this happens all the time in our communities. So this is what I want to share. Thank you.
Thank you for that, for those comments. Does any one of you want to comment?
Kurasumanga, Levi. Obrigada. Muchas gracias. Very excellent questions, and I think this is really touch the foundations of what indigenous economy and bioeconomy should be. As we all talking about how do we connect the bridge, how do we, so indigenous economy is not just about bringing food, goods from indigenous territories into the market, but it's really to build the relationship. It's really to strengthen the solidarity, and that's what we call reciprocity, right? So we share something that we have, and you also share something that you have. It's not trading, it's not exchange, but it's really sharing. And therefore, we also need to share the same value, the same wisdom, that we are taking care of our Mother Earth and we respect each other. That's why those who are not in the good faith, in the end, will be out of the game. I believe on this. And that's also why in the good faith, we have to make sure that it is not offset like carbon market. Our problem of carbon market is because it is offset. Like you do good things in Levi's community, for example, and that's okay to kill all of the Amazon. That is not in the good faith. That's the kind of investors or our partners, the other end of this relationship should not be. They are not welcome. Yeah, the partners on this indigenous economy, or whatever you can call it, must not come from extractive industries. Yeah, from people who disrespect indigenous people's rights everywhere. So if you are from mining, you are not welcome here. If you are from logging company, you are not welcome here. If you are from geothermal who destroy our life, you are not welcome here. If you are from oil and gas company, you are welcome here. So I think this is all actually capturing, you capture well what is the conditions of all this what we call partnership. And I really appreciate all of the work, good work that have been done in other part of the world. Thank you very much.
I think I can give you my legal perspective about how make sure that the contract will be fair. It's hard, even for us to be 100% that will be fair, because a lot of stuff can happen, and sometimes also when they are negotiating with good faith, distortions can happen because they do not understand 100% your reality. So my advice is always talk a lot. Ask about everything that you do not understand, or if you understand but you're not 100% sure, ask. Talk a lot. Talk about your people, your way of life, what we do, what is important for you, and always ask for the language of the contract to be easy for you to understand. And this is one of the main principles for a fair contract. You need to understand what have been saying there in the document. The other thing that for me could be important for the contracts is to have a clause or maybe like a topic in the contract that saying that you can review the contract if it's something happened that will violate your territory or your community or your way of life. It happened a lot, even here in Brazil with carbon market, the private carbon market contracts, that the companies start to put barriers in normal life of the indigenous community. And they will not understand why I cannot do what I'm always have been doing here. And the contract said, no, but you assigned that, you cannot do that. And for me, this is a matter that you can review the contract, because, hey, I cannot sign a contract that is stopping me to live my life as I always lived, with, of course, without kill the nature. So to have this type of topic clause is important to protect you, and it will be easier to go to the court if it's something happened, to try to say, hey, they are violating this contract and I want to review it or I want to cancel it. It protects you.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you, Levi, for a very important reflection and question. I think that many times private sector, it's their conversations is transactional. It's not about relationships. Us as indigenous people, it's about relationships. It's about building trust and accountability. And in the contracting, and this is why I think it's really important that indigenous peoples build their capacity to negotiate these contracts. And of course, better that it's indigenous lawyers that are helping, who have the contextual knowledge and appreciation of the values and cosmovision of the indigenous community. We don't always have that, but at least from my experience in Belize, we were able to develop and negotiate a free prior informed consent protocol, which is now an instrument of law that establishes how indigenous peoples are to be consulted, how they give or withhold their consent, and that begins to operationalize that right. And so we've been able to hold companies, private sector, the government itself, to the obligation of that protocol. Now, when you begin to operationalize it, you will realize that there's always an imbalance. The companies will always come with their legal team, and the indigenous peoples don't have legal teams. And so already you see that that's an imbalance of power, an imbalance of capacity. What we have been able to do, at least the organization I work with, is to leverage indigenous people's capacity by looking for legal support, always following communities with legal support. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of indigenous lawyers in Belize. It's a very small country, but we do have a lot of allies who have assisted us, helped us to really negotiate fair contracts. And I think that one word, I've always said this to my leaders, one word can change the meaning of everything in law. And so we have to always be careful how we craft and articulate what we're agreeing to, the conditions, the provisions within any contract. And so I think it's absolutely important to have these kinds of legal support to indigenous communities. We have seen the difference between a well-negotiated contract where the indigenous community had legal support and one where they didn't have legal support. And the whole point of FPIC is to ensure that we avoid harm. So thank you very much. We're severely out of time, but thank you. This was really interesting, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Well done. No, I think it's 5 to 10 minutes.